If you know one thing about me, you know that I look 20 years younger than I actually am. If you know two things about me, you know that I was a nuclear reactor operator on Trident ballistic missile submarines. My job was to split atoms of uranium-235 to generate electricity, air, water, and propulsion for a billion-dollar warship. Throughout my career, I've also been a technical trainer. I've made videos for all number of subjects because I enjoy educating people. I enjoy disseminating information and sharing perspectives that I think people will find useful in their lives and in their careers. Unfortunately, this will be a video of a much more serious nature. In fact, this video will be the most deadly serious video that I'll ever make in my life. And I'm making it because it matters. This subject has the ability to affect you, your loved ones, and everyone you could ever possibly know in this world. So my two hopes with this video are, first, that I get it to you in time before it's too late, and two, that you take it with the seriousness with which it is intended. Now, normally in a video essay, you'd want to have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. You'd basically tell your audience what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. By reinforcing the information 3 times, you ensure that your audience gets the information that you want them to have. But unfortunately, this is one of those situations where I can't do that. This is one of those cases where if I tell you what's going to happen, it won't happen. So because I can't tell you what I'm going to tell you, I will instead tell you how I'm going to tell you. There's going to be 3 major sections, the first of which has 4 short stories, just a couple sentences, a couple descriptions of things that have been going on or that have happened, and then I'll wrap those up to explain what they have to do with each other. When I'm done with that, I'll move into section 2, where I add some more information and describe how we get to section 1. Then in section 3, I will add some more information, wrap everything together, and explain what it has to do with you. Section number 1, chunk of information number 1. The submarine that I served on was a Trident-class ballistic missile submarine. They contain up to 24 missiles, and each of those missiles has multiple warheads. And those warheads aren't just atomic bombs, but thermonuclear atomic bombs, meaning that they undergo a fission-fusion-fission reaction for devastating effect. The mission that we serve out in the open ocean is called strategic deterrence. It's based on the idea of mutually assured destruction, which is a Cold War-era concept, wherein basically you have, say, 2 sides that have nuclear missiles that can reach each other, and each side is far enough away from the other that they can see each other launch and they can have their own counterstrike. So if this side launches first, this side sees it, they launch their missiles, and the missiles pass each other in the night, and everyone dies. And same in reverse. If this side launches first, this side sees it, launches, and then missiles pass each other, and everyone dies. Now, the deterrent effect here is based on the assumption that both sides will act rationally and work against their own demise. So keep a pin in that idea. Chunk of information number 2. In 1981, a group of Israeli fighter jets flew into Iraq to destroy a nuclear power plant. The Israelis believed at the time that they were setting back the Iraqis by 10 years, meaning that by depriving them of a research tool, they were slowing down their pursuit of nuclear arms. Now, that assessment was widely disputed at the time, and it's been disputed ever since, but such as it is, there is a precedent for a country sending fighter jets into a foreign country to stop them from having nuclear arms, to slow down nuclear proliferation. Chunk of information number 3. Between 2005 and 2010, a virus called Stuxnet was developed and was deployed against Iranian computers with the express intention of destroying their nuclear centrifuges. Now, a nuclear centrifuge is basically a device that you would use to enrich a fissile material, such as uranium, in order to achieve a weapons-grade material. So again, this is a case of a weapon being used against an enemy to stop them from acquiring nuclear weapons, or to slow them down in that pursuit. Chunk of information number 4. A movie came out recently called Top Gun: Maverick. In the movie, a group of American fighter jets fly into a foreign country to destroy their nuclear centrifuges. Now, if you're paying attention, that's basically just a swap of the previous 2 stories. Instead of fighter jets to destroy a power plant or a virus to destroy a group of centrifuges, they sent fighter jets to destroy a group of nuclear centrifuges. Now, I mentioned the movie because you've probably seen it. this is an example, a dramatized example of a thing that actually happens, a thing that's actually happened, and a thing that we actually have the capability to do. And the reason I mention that is because when I speak of the Top Gun mission going forward in this video, I want you to understand that we're talking about a real thing that you can actually identify with, something that you've seen, even if it's just been on the silver screen. It's something that you can identify with, you can understand and grasp the significance of what's going on and what they were trying to achieve with that mission. And you can also identify it as an example of American exceptionalism in terms of the role that America plays in the wider scale of things and how we contribute to international safety in terms of nuclear arms. Section number 2. So what we're talking about here is nuclear proliferation, right? There are 3 major issues with an enemy nation acquiring nuclear arms. The first is the most obvious one that everyone panics about, which is the all-out nuclear war, end-of-the-world kind of situation. Even if we don't destroy every single country on the planet, if we destroy enough of the Earth's surface and put enough stuff into the atmosphere, with all that radiation, with all that contamination, with the radioactive debris that would be in the sky and carried around the world through the weather, it would be devastating to not just human life, but all the life that we depend on to survive for food. It would be devastating to us as a species. That's the most obvious one that people tend to refer to, but there's also 2 other cases that we also just don't want. The second case is just a simple tactical nuke situation used as like a terrorist attack, for example. Like we wouldn't want another 9/11 to happen to Ohio or Texas or anywhere else in this country. It would have international implications, just like 9/11 did, because it would affect other countries, even if we only use conventional warfare from then on. The third case, also bad, is when a foreign country gains a level of leverage in terms of politics and national defense that we don't want. For example, Russia invaded Crimea a while back, and we didn't really do anything because we couldn't. They're obviously invading Ukraine right now, and we aren't sending fighter jets over there for a reason. We are waging a very indirect war because we fear the consequence of Putin launching missiles against us. In fact, he's already threatened us with nuclear war if we move against them. And all the countries, in their own preservation and in the preservation of each other, have always publicly announced what their actual nuclear policy is supposed to be, because we don't want people making misjudgments on what's going to trigger a nuclear war. So everyone announces what their nuclear policy is, and one of Russia's policies is that they will use nuclear arms if their sanctity or if their sovereignty is violated and they face some sort of existential threat. Now, if they declare Ukraine theirs and we try to liberate Ukraine from them, they could presumably argue that that's a violation of their sovereignty and, proceed from there. So basically what happens with a country when it gains nuclear status is that they get a lot more leeway to do things that people don't want them to do, like push other countries around and invade them, because the consequences against them are often not going to be a direct military assault. What's going to happen is they'll get like economic sanctions and indirect things like that. So we wouldn't want someone like Iran or Yemen or a lot of other countries to have that kind of negotiation power. So how do we stop nuclear proliferation? Well, that is a complicated subject, and I'll just try to broach it very briefly by relating it to another form of technological competition, so like the automobile industry. If you look at Tesla, they've been widely praised for being about 5 years ahead of their competition, meaning that other car companies have purchased Teslas and have evaluated their technology to say that it would take them about 5 years to figure out how it really works and then how to produce it themselves. And that is a pretty incredible feat given this day and age, considering that we're in the age of information, meaning that a lot of people around the world have access to basically the same stuff, right? So to be able to keep any kind of significant lead on your competition is always going to be impressive. Now compare that to the nuclear age, where At present, only 9 countries in the world have nuclear arms. Now, granted, a lot of them don't necessarily have a desire to acquire nuclear arms, but as I said before, countries gain a lot of negotiation power when they have them. So a lot of countries are still interested in getting them. And we've been able to stop that from happening for 70 years. We've been dealing in nuclear technology for a long time, and we've been 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ahead of a lot of our competition, most of the world, for 70 years. That is an incredible feat, and Elon Musk will never match that. He will never have a company that has that much of a lead over anybody, and certainly not for 70 years. So understand that we're talking about a wide-scale, long-term commitment that we have been able to pull off in impressive fashion. Now, in terms of the other thing, as far as physically stopping your enemies from having something that they're not supposed to have, you can kind of relate that to, say, drugs. So if you have a neighbor that's manufacturing and selling drugs out of their home, what would you do? Well, you'd probably call the cops, right? And the cops would ask around, they do some investigation. If they find that there's enough probable cause, they'll get a warrant and they'll search the building and they'll confiscate anything that's indicative and proof of a crime so that they can form their case, and then they'll bring them to justice through legal means thereafter. Now, one thing that the police won't do in that case is call ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to raid you at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. Is that cool with you? Because obviously you don't want them to have that kind of heads up. You don't want them to have the opportunity to disassemble their labs and to redistribute them and basically hide from the law. Now, when it comes to nuclear arms, basically the same thing applies. You don't want your enemies to know what you know because they can move them, they can redistribute them, they can do things to evade whatever you intend on doing, whether it's the Top Gun mission or anything else. I should also mention, of course, that Stuxnet virus that infected those Iranian computers is widely believed to have crossed an air gap at some point, meaning that some computers probably weren't connected to the internet and that they may have been infected by a USB device or something like that, meaning that someone had to carry the virus by hand into the system. If that's the case, we may have had a mole working there, or we may have had someone get recruited into the system. Either way, that would have involved the intelligence community in a large part. So, in terms of stopping nuclear proliferation, even to do the Top Gun mission or to do the Stuxnet mission, we're talking about American secrets, we're talking about enemy secrets, and we're talking about keeping enemy secrets secret from them as they are collected as part of American secrets. Another thing I should mention that a lot of you probably don't know about is that our submarines have long been involved in the intelligence community and the process of intelligence gathering. There's this book here called Blind Man's Bluff, and this talks about submarine espionage during the Cold War. My favorite one is about how we used to use American submarines to plant listening devices on the phone lines going to the Kremlin. So you can see here, this is an example of one of those. It says here, when the Soviets discovered recording devices attached to a cable beneath this place, there was no mistake who had put them there. Inside one of the 20-foot-long pods were the words, property of the United States government. Kind of a fun fuck you to the enemy there, huh? So, our submarines were involved in intelligence gathering, so it's part of our culture and part of our community to not just know that we have the ability to launch missiles against our enemies and thereby provide strategic deterrence to prevent people from launching missiles, but also we were involved in gathering information to find out if and when someone was going to try to launch missiles. Now, as far as Americans keeping track of our own secrets and keeping those safe, a lot really goes into that. There's, first of all, patriotism. There's dedication to the job. There's policies, rules, physical barriers, the works. All these things work together. To relate to you what that's kind of like, I told you at the beginning of this video that I split atoms for a living. So I was on a billion-dollar vessel working in the military in a place where we keep secrets, and it was in a metal tube in the middle of nowhere, where we was as far as could possibly be from any enemy eyes, right? But at no point did we ever have information just kind of laying out, right? I never even knew where we were. It was my job to split atoms and to push the boat through the water, but I didn't know when we were going left or right or what that would mean because I didn't know where we were in the water. Um, it was fairly rare for a nuclear operator to even be in the front of the boat, the cone that we call it. And if you were to walk towards the nav station where they're calculating and plotting where we are, they would kind of look at you weird. They'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What are you doing here?" Like they would put barriers and they would like kind of stop you and say, "You don't. This is not your area, and this is not where you're supposed to be." So, me with my secret clearance was far and away not able to approach or access information that was like top secret, right? So I just want to impress upon you like how compartmentalized secure data really is in the military. So, so when you tell me that if I go golfing in Florida, there is potentially a pool boy out there who can tell me exactly what the Kremlin said from information that we could have gathered on a submarine I could have been on at a time that I wouldn't have known what we were doing or where I even was at the time. I wish I could impart to you the level of horror in my brain because that is just so incredibly insane. That doesn't just undermine everything that we've been doing for 70 years. It undermines our national security and our international security. It jeopardizes everything. It jeopardizes everything. I mean, we're talking about information that if it gets to our enemies, if our enemies find out what we know about them, they can find the mole that dropped off the Stuxnet virus. They could interrogate them. They can find out the methods that we used to recruit that person. They can stop. They can erect policies that stop us from getting in there again. They can stop us from accessing that information in the future. They can put an iron curtain between us and the knowledge of where they're currently at in their nuclear armament. And ever since the nuclear age began, and ever since we've not been the only people with nuclear weapons, we've basically been in a Mexican standoff with everyone else who might possibly launch missiles against us. We cannot sustain a Yosemite Sam character entering into that Mexican standoff to destabilize everything. It dramatically increases the chance of nuclear war, it dramatically increases the chance of a nuclear strike on American soil, and it dramatically increases the chance that we might not be able to push certain countries around who are trying to commit all kinds of atrocities in their area and around them. The Stuxnet mission and the Top Gun mission, the movie that you've seen, the thing that can really happen, that is incompatible with the free flow of information. There is a viable chain of custody of nuclear secrets going from the US government to a pool boy to Reddit to our enemies. And then that could be the end of the world. Maybe not now, not tomorrow, but at some point in the future. And understand that you're not going to find any historians or political experts or anybody who's going to say that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon tomorrow, that the world is going to end by Friday. But understand that those assessments are all based on the idea that crazy people don't gain power in those places, that everyone who is smart enough to acquire nuclear weapons are going to be smart enough not to destroy themselves. But history shows that that is just a really shitty assumption to make. Crazy people have been in a lot of positions of power a lot of times throughout history, and that is just not a safe bet to make, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm just being overly pessimistic, but there is a very clear logic to why we don't just distribute nuclear weapons to even our friends. We don't just like hand them out as party favors in case bad guys show up. This is not a case where you arm the police at Uvalde to stop the active shooter. You don't hand out guns to everybody when they're nuclear guns because it ends everybody. And they are telling you right now that these documents were declassified, and those people are lying to you. We have patriots and people who work day to day with top secret information, and they do not work by memory to decide which things are classified and which things are not. They put those cover sheets on them for a reason. Those cover sheets are there to tell people what the hell they are, so that at the end of a meeting where everyone has brought in different kinds of documents, that those particular kinds of documents go back in the safe at the end of the meeting. They don't just lay out like anyone else's random emails so that they can end up on the internet. Those cover sheets tell you exactly what they are. Do not let anyone tell you that they do not say the thing that they say, because that's why they say it. They are telling you what they are. Now, I'm not going to even talk about what we do to declassify paperwork, but they could have done anything to indicate that they're not classified. They could have lined them out. They could have crossed them out. They could have scribbled, etched all across with a Sharpie. They could have stamped it. They could have at the very least taken the cover sheets off. And we're talking about a guy who is widely reported by people like Bob Woodward and others to often preface the discussion by saying, this is really top secret information, this is really highly classified stuff, and I shouldn't be telling you this, and then he proceeds to tell you this. Because he likes to brag about himself. He is his own favorite subject in the world to talk about. So ask yourself this: why would those cover sheets be intact in his office? Can you think of any better reason than for a man who likes to brag about himself to be able to wave a piece of paper in your face that tells you how important it is to make him important by proxy? Is that not the kind of guy that you know? Isn't he the guy that you exactly know him to be?
Nobody else has them, but I want you to treat them with respect. I
understand.
And don't say I gave them to you, okay?
Okay.
But I think it's okay. Normally, I wasn't going to give them to Bob.
I asked him for the letters that he wrote to Kim Jong-un because I had only the letters Kim had written to him. Oh, those are so top secret, Trump said, but I'll let you see them. I don't want you to have them all. Recent investigations revealed that Trump kept these letters along with other sensitive and top-secret documents at Mar-a-Lago after he left office. The National Archives retrieved the letters from Mar-a-Lago in January 2022.
The fact that those cover sheets are intact, and were intact at the time that the FBI went there, tells you that that is criminal intent. He could have removed those cover sheets to make a better, stronger case for those things being declassified, because those cover sheets wouldn't have at least been there. The fact that the cover sheets are intact, it tells you what his mindset was. Anyone who tells you that these documents are not classified is lying to you. Use your own eyes. Use your own brain. You know what these words mean. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You guys talk about 1984 all the time, and this is a war is peace moment. They are telling you to your face that you can't use your own face to tell you what's in front of your own face. Do not let them gaslight you like this. Be smarter than that. You know what those words mean. You know what those papers say. And there's 4 things going on right now. The first is just that they're lying to you. The second is that they're throwing everything at the wall that they possibly can. They know that the people who are receiving these excuses and falling for them are not going to check notes amongst each other. Trump knows that he can throw out 20 different excuses for why people shouldn't be alarmed about his behavior, and he can find 20 different followers who will each keep their own favorite excuse in mind and believe it. And they're not going to check notes with each other, they're not going to fact check, and they're not going to yell at each other, at their own friends, and call them idiots for believing the other thing, even though they're all mutually exclusive. They don't care. They're on the same side. They're going to all just admit that they're just Trump supporters, and nothing matters anyways. Cognitive dissonance is the machine that whole system runs on.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it. And there doesn't have to be a process. There can be a process, but there doesn't have to be. You're the president. You make that decision. So when you send it, it's declassified. I declassified everything.
You know what that is? That is smart. That's what that is.
Thank you, Wizrobe. I am full of ideas.
And we have people like Tucker Carlson downplaying these things by saying that we overclassify stuff all the time. And his example was the formula for disappearing ink. He's saying that we shouldn't consider the formula to be such a big deal because you can go to a toy store and it's in a kid's magic supply. And that's fundamentally not why we keep those things secret, or why we kept it secret for so long. The reason that it was a secret is because it was in the training material for the CIA, meaning that people and assets who were working overseas for America had to use disappearing ink as a matter of protecting their secrets. Now, why would you use disappearing ink? Well, because 1, the information is incredibly sensitive, and 2, because it's incredibly insecure. If the data could be secured properly, it would be printed in regular ink, and it would be in a safe. You would use disappearing ink because the information is so insecure that the only way to store sensitive information is basically out in the open, or someplace where it can be put easily into the open. The reason that we kept the formula a secret is because it would admit to our enemies that that's the formula we were using to hide our secrets, meaning that they could use heat treatment or a chemical spray to uncover our secrets, our sensitive secrets that were in the open that they would likely have access to. Tucker Carlson does not know why we keep secrets. The third thing that they're doing is that they're telling you that this is a thing of the past. Why are we litigating the past? But that is also a bald-faced lie. This is an ongoing threat. Do you know who Monica Lewinsky is? Because a really good portion of the planet does, and that happened 30 years ago, and the information is still being spread today. I guarantee that if Monica Lewinsky ever goes to a job interview today, that even if the job interviewer doesn't know who she is, the moment she walks out of that office, someone else is going to be like, hey, was that person who blew the president that one time? That was 30 years ago. That information is still spreading around. Once a secret is in the open, it is perpetually dangerous. The executive branch of government, the Department of Justice, needs to perform an intelligence assessment to find out exactly where that information has gone over the last 2 years. We need to know, were hard copies made? Were soft copies made? Are there digital versions of that information that have been emailed to other people? Did Donald Trump mention this stuff over the phone? Who on the phone on the other receiving end might have gotten this information? Until we've performed that full assessment, it is an ongoing threat to the world. This is not a thing of the past. It is an ongoing problem. And at the same time that all of this is going on, Donald Trump is using a corrupt judge to obstruct justice and to aid and abet in the crime of nuclear espionage. The intelligence assessment was delayed by the special master process that should not have been used, and by jurisdiction alone should not have even gone to this person. He is performing more crimes while he's trying to stop us from discovering the other crimes. And the fourth thing is that they're distracting you with everything they possibly can. Of course, they're still talking about Hillary's emails, even though that was like 11 years ago. And people are talking about Hunter Biden's laptop. And I've heard that phrase so often that it is very clear to me that no one knows what that phrase actually means. Murderers murder. Thieves engage in thievery. Traitors trade in national secrets and the security of their countries. Apparently, Hunter Biden laptopped.
Let me explain to you how this works. You see, the corporations finance Team America. And then Team America goes out, and the corporations sit there in their corporation buildings, and see that they're all corporation-y, and they make money.
That is not a real indictment of an actual crime. And even if it were, you're comparing that to nuclear fucking espionage. Anyone who tells you that this is not a serious situation is lying to you. And they're not just lying to you, they're making a fool of you. And they're not just making a fool of you, they're making a fool of you for their own benefit. And they're not just making a fool of you for their own benefit, they're making a fool of you for their own benefit at the risk of civilization. Do not defend these actions. Do not defend people who defend these actions. And do not defend people who defend people who defend these actions. They are not your friend. They do not care if you die in a nuclear fire as long as they get elected. People have talked for a long time about how callous politicians are and how none of them really care about you. That is true. But one side is not trying to perpetuate those events. They're not actually trying to set the sky on fire. And I understand. I have conservative friends, and I know that there's a lot of you that have a commitment to Republicans as a culture, and you object to the woke media, and you have a lot of reasons to vote Republican, and I get that. That's fine. But the MAGA thing is a completely different danger that threatens both of us. And as far as the woke stuff, understand too that that is a self-fixing problem. Go woke, go broke is the phrase, right? That's an admission that capitalism has a job to do, so let capitalism do its job. I don't like Disney movies either. I mean, what they did to The Last Jedi, I could talk about that for months. But understand that this is a self-fixing problem. You know that you don't have to be dead to not support Disney, right? You can just not buy their movies. And then the Little Mermaid thing is actually kind of funny because it's literally about the story of a creature using magic to change its race. So she could have been black in the first half and Asian in the second half, and that could have been completely in line with the story, but whatever. The other things, like inflation and gas prices, you realize that your purchasing power drops to about 0 when you're deceased, right? Understand what you're talking about here with your family and everyone that you love. And we know that the politicians who are defending this are all of the election deniers as well. So they're easy to identify. Just find out if your politician is saying that there were things about the election that they don't trust. Because we know from the January 6 witnesses, who were all Republican, that they were in the White House and they had access to all the best information in this country as far as the integrity of the election, and they knew that it was safe. The only people in the White House who said it was a fraud were lying, and they knew it. Bill Barr went public saying that he knew that it was all bullshit, and he was ostracized for it, and he wasn't advertised in the conservative media and the conservative circles for having outed the truth.
But I also felt it was time for me to say something. I set up a lunch with the AP reporter, Mike Balsamo, and I told him at lunch, I made this statement, that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit. And, he was indignant about that.
Now, of course, conservatives always talk about the mainstream media and the liberal bias, but understand that the conservative side has a bias too. And what the liberal media has going for it is that they're not trying to end the world. And there's a lot of conservative politicians right now who have scrubbed Trump from their websites because they know that he's becoming more and more unpopular. But you need to go back and research your politicians to find out if they are still election deniers or if they were election deniers, because we know that where their allegiances are in the future or where they might be in the future if the price is right. But understand that people who will defend nuclear fucking espionage do not care if you die in a nuclear fire. These people are not your friends. And if you think they're your friends, then who needs enemies? Honestly. Because we have conservatives who are wearing t-shirts who say, rather be Russian than Democrat. Literally a country that not 2 weeks ago threatened us with nuclear war and that has had bounties on our soldiers in Afghanistan before, during Trump's time. If you didn't think these issues were important before, please wake up. There was a lot on the line.